I want to talk about rank. And in particular, look at the Asian cultural tendency, particularly Thai and Chinese, for example, to establish the rank of every relationship. So you have first sister, second sister, third sister. And in some cases, that's it. That's, first sister will be called first sister. And she'll say, hello, third sister, hello, first sister, and the rank is established. And the name is secondary. The rank is primary. Senior authority, senior deity, lower deity. So there's a complex ranking hierarchy that in some cults and some cultures is the defining basis for the relationship. And I've been watching hundreds of hours of Chinese fantasy, traditional fantasy, and what I've been looking at is the archetypal dynamics and guidelines in these relationships. So you have, first of all, an animate world. You have, tree spirits, animals that turn into people, that turn back into, foxes or birds or various things. So you have an animate world. And then you tend to have things like a plant spirit wouldn't be as high ranking as a demon. But a high celestial deity, a high god, would rank higher than a demon. But there's also the king of the demons. So you have this kind of hierarchy, which maybe down here starts as kind of plant sprites and spirits, and then goes into certain animals, and then there'd be a ranking of animals, where maybe an eagle would be a higher rank than a mouse. Maybe, right? And then you would have the, like in the Fox clan, the nine-tailed fox is higher ranking than the one-tailed fox. Then you might have the nine-tailed white fox. So there's ranks within color, ranks within number of tails, ranks within species, ranks, from the simplicity of a plant to going into an animal, going into then the demons. Right? So a demon, then you have the lower demon, a basic, employee demon, and then you have the mortals, right? So you have the demon, then you have the mortals, but a really high power, like a demon king, might be higher ranking than a mortal peasant, right? But what about a demon king and a mortal king? Generally, I think the demons are higher ranking than mortals, but there's crossover there. And then you have the basic angels. You have a fair amount of chauvinism, and so generally speaking, the highest rank in all of the world's mythologies of kind of major cultures today, it's all male up at the top. In behavior, if not in title. I don't think there's been there are variations in that. But I would say 70% of the time, it is a male at the top that is portrayed as the deity, that which is to be emulated the most. Heaven god. I don't think there's a heaven goddess, at least in most of the series that I've been watching. And Ashes of Love, Eternal Love, the White Snake. These are some of the more kind of, as far as I can tell, classic Chinese narratives. And there's a whole cosmology of deities, and it's a complex realm. what I like about the Chinese landscape of archetypes is that there's, like, if there's a birthday party in heaven, the demon king will be invited, and among the deities there might be the god of the pestilence god. In India, it might be the Kali, the goddess of war or whatever. So what's interesting is that the full range of human experience is deified in Asian culture, whereas in Western culture it's more polarized, where God is above and is good and the demon is bad. And so the automatic default is that the whole basis of good is to kill and destroy the bad. So it's a little bit more simplistic. There's no place of honor, in Western culture for that. But nevertheless, there's hierarchies. So let's say you're in the angel thing, which is not a very high level in the heaven clan. You're an angel. But then you might have a whole family of angels, and then you would have, fourth angel, third angel, second angel, first angel in that ranking of age. So age, seniority is valued in Chinese culture. So if you're older, you're higher ranked. And then you have certain classifications that are higher, like the god of war is usually in the top 3 deities. The god of toilets, the god of plague and pestilence comes in, but is not as honored a deity within the narrative. The god of war so far has always been a man. But there's this basic kind of ranking process that kind of goes all the way down from a simple plant through the demon realm, all the way up to the highest of the high. Xi-Ming, the deity that controls the stars and the destinies of human beings. There's the god of marriage and bond and ties and all these things. Now, I guess the first thing is that there's a clear sense of rank. And the second thing is that the highest deities in the rank include the lowest. So in here we get a shape like this, where we have in the center something very small and simplistic and unsophisticated. And then as we go out, we're talking about a relationship of stewardship and competence that includes. So Heaven Lord, for example, is supposed to care for the 9 realms, the 6 kingdoms, the 8 wildernesses, the whole thing, basically, the whole shebang. And that's why everyone is supposed to bow, including the demons, to Heaven Lord. Because Heaven Lord has the biggest sphere of authority and focus and responsibility. So this is, and this is also, within, for example, the plant hierarchy. You might have a flower spirit. And see, it's not based on the beauty. Obviously, a flower spirit might be very, very beautiful, but it's very, very tiny and has a limited focus, and it's only interested in its little world. Whereas if you talk to the goddess of summer, the goddess of summer's job is to create the environment in which all of the flowers blossom. So all the flowers would then bow to the goddess of summer, because if there wasn't any summer, there would be no flowers. There'd be no environment for flowers. And so in that sense, you have a nested hierarchy based on size. And, you know, in this sense, the authority is very intuitive and makes sense. For example, if we take this into kind of a Western analogy, and one person is responsible for nailing nails, and then another person is responsible for the design for a house, and then another person is responsible for the design for the neighborhood, and then another person is designed for the grids throughout the entire county or city, and then one for the whole state, and then one for the whole country. And then, you know, you have basically responsibilities. So you have the wideness of the focus is a big part of rank. So the wider your focus, if your focus is to bless the entirety of existence, then you're up at the top. And there's a tremendous amount of ritual bowing. And so the bowing, who bows to who, establishes the rank. And, you know, in a practical sense, we're talking about who defers to who. So should the person who's nailing a nail defer to the person designing the community road structure that would bring the nails to that location? Or should the person designing the community road structure bow to the person with the nails? You see, in a healthy relationship of authority and rank, you have competent authority, which seeks for the best for everything within its domain. And you have a certain amount of democracy around that, where, you know, the person who can design the streets that will create the most flow and well-being for the neighborhood is the person who's given the role of designing the streets. And everyone bows to that authority, because without it, none of the things get to their homes. In a culture filled with cars, for example, if you want to move into a house, you've got to use a street network. And so if the streets were corrupted, you know, basically people said, you know, move out of here, you know, we're busy having a maypole, no streets get built, and then there's no streets, well, then there's no building supplies coming on those streets, and there's no houses, and there's no commuting to work. And so it's, you know, so who has the most impact and who is the most competent at bringing well-being to you? That's the determiner for the authority. So the smaller focuses bow to the larger focuses, and the larger focuses serve the well-being of the smaller focuses and create space for them. And that's kind of the underpinning for this entire rank system. So you'll have a demon that will bow to a heaven lord, as long as the heaven lord is not hypocritical and greedy and too much filled with nepotism and has equal standards, right? So that's when the demons kind of rebel against the angels or whatever, is when they're tired of the abuse of power from those at the top. So I just find that an interesting architecture to make so explicit. And then the other thing that I think of is, this entire thing is becoming internalized in each individual. And the question is which, given all of the inner voices and all of the inner archetypes and all the inner personas and, the part of us that just wants hedonistic pleasure and the part of us that, just wants to be right, and the part of us that wants to fight and win, and the part of us, so all of these different archetypal energies that are on the outside, they're all on the inside. And the question is, how do we rank? Who's running the ship? Who's running our life? Who's at the wheel? And that determines the amount of sustainable well-being that we're experiencing. Right? If you put a 5-year-old at the wheel of a family, and every time the 5-year-old sees ice cream, he just takes the beeline straight towards it, fatalities and auto crashes, etc., because a 5-year-old just sees ice cream and it's not paying attention to the directions of the road and doesn't know how to drive a car very well. So if you put a 5-year-old with immediate gratification to run the ship, what happens? But if you elect, the 50-year-old to take care of the 5-year-old, in a healthy relationship, the 5-year-old will bow to the 50-year-old, and the 50-year-old will take better care of the 5-year-old than the 5-year-old would. Meaning, in that example with the traffic accident of let's get ice cream and this and that, if you're dead, it's not a very good system. And I think the Chinese movies do a pretty good job, in things like Ashes of Love, of both showing the hypocrisy and cruelty and stupidity that is at the top of many cult power systems and supposed democracies, etc., and supposedly the good guys and the bad guys. It's if you look closely, they're telling the story of corruption of power, of mislabeling. But they're also kind of, you get to see the suffering. You get to see the benefits that come when certain parts of the psyche are elected and honored. To honor a part of oneself is that the other parts of the self change to accommodate, to make space for one part of the self. And the question is, who should change for what? Should the peasant change to serve the king, or should the king change to serve the peasant? And of course, in the best relationships, it goes both ways. The peasant bows to serve the king, that is the most competent king that makes safety and well-being for the entire country, including the peasant, such that the peasant's life is better because of their king's existence than if they had no king, than if they were left to their own devices. And so I recommend, and I'm greatly enjoying watching these, 50 to 100 episode series where there's sophisticated, complex relationships of power and culture, etc., and where it's a very complex culture, and where every consciousness, etc., has its role and its rank and its probability field of this is how it goes well, and then here's how it all unravels. When you have a corrupt heaven lord that doesn't apply their own rules and is too cruel and brutal, here's how it all unravels.